So our first hour, I hope you have a good memory. Our first hour, we talked about praise trust, right? And I told you I'm going to tell you about the opposite end of the spectrum, adversity trust. Most of the time when you hear about adversity trust or overcoming adversity or tough times in a church setting, it talks about something happening when somebody dies. But really, anytime something difficult happens in our lives, we go through adversity. And as a Christian, you need to be a witness through that time also, just like when you're going through praise trust. So I want to talk to you about adversity trust. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you a quick story. I had kind of an awkward experience with your principal last night, Mr. Holtzheimer. He picked me up at the airport, and he had a big sign that said Dr. Parker on it. It had glitter on it and everything. I appreciated that. He put a lot of effort into it. Say, here I am. We go get my luggage. We're driving to the hotel. He's very excited about this school. He's telling me pretty much about every individual here, and he's just talking and talking and talking. As he's talking, he turns onto a road. We first were on this big, huge road, and then we went to a smaller road, and then went to a smaller road, and then we turned on to a gravel road. Now I'm getting a little concerned because I just took for granted who he said he was. I didn't ask him for ID or anything, and I'm starting to get a little bit worried. I said, do you know where you're going? Do you know where the hotel is I'm supposed to be staying at? I said, yeah, I do. Sorry, I got to talking. I got distracted. I know exactly where I'm going. We start driving a little while longer. I know we need to go that way, so we're driving a little while. We're on a gravel road now. We take a corner a little bit too fast, and the rear end of the car starts to scoot a little bit. And that didn't concern me all that much until I noticed that he kind of enjoyed it. And so that did worry me a little bit. We come up to the next corner, and Mr. Holtzheimer wants to get me to the hotel quickly, and again, that first corner was a little stressful. We get up to the next corner, and he takes it way too fast. He loses control of the car, so he's driving like this. We look up ahead of us, and there's a pickup coming in the opposite direction, and the pickup is trying to guess which way he is going with his car. And so, we get so close to each other. We have the deer in the headlights look at each other. I can see the whites of this guy's eyes. He's trying to guess where we're going. Our bumpers miss by maybe 6 inches. Whoom! And as this guy goes by in the pickup, he yells. He puts his arm out the window, and he yells, "Pig!" Al turns to me and says, I can assure you that's no one from Sheboygan Lutheran. I don't know why that guy's so upset. He was swerving all over the road, too. And I look up and I said, Mr. Holtzheimer! We run right over the pig. He ran over a pig. Now, the pig in that story, exactly, the pig in that story is a lot like adversity in our lives. Some of you right now are saying, is that true or not? Is that true or not? 10% of our population are conspiracy theorists. So even though that's a really old joke, but if I tell about it, somebody that you know, you doubt it and question it, and 10% of you will believe that he did kill the pig last night, so I kind of enjoy that. But I told that story because if I talk really fast at the end, the last line surprises you. It surprises you, and that's a lot like adversity in our lives. Adversity always surprises us. But should it? In the Bible, it says, in this world you will have trouble. But fear not, for I have overcome the world. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're going to have an easy time in your life. We are a lot like Al driving that imaginary car, meaning the verse I'm going to share with you again, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, the last line says, he will make your path straight. We're a lot like that. We get distracted all the time, and then adversity will surprise us. It's funny how when good things happen to us in our lives, it doesn't surprise us, but when adversity happens, it often surprises us. So let's read that verse again, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Please read this with me. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. So I want to tell you 3 true stories about what God has taught me in my life, about what it means to handle things when things aren't going good in your life. These are true stories, unlike the story I just told about your principal. And this is a love story. The first story involves me when I was in college. This is going to be hard for you to believe, but I was dating this beautiful, beautiful, talented, smart Christian young lady. She was wonderful, and we were dating for quite a long time. It got up to the point where it was about 3.5 weeks when she asked me a really stressful question. She said, would you like to come home with me over Christmas break and meet my parents? Well, that's borderline commitment. So I said, no, I can't do that. I got a lot of stuff to do over Christmas break. And I called my parents later that night and told them what had happened and what she had asked me to do, and I was giving them all the excuses of why I would not go. And my mom says, Micah, have you not figured out yet she can do a lot better than you, son. I think you need to go. And my father's very encouraging too. He's in the background saying, yes, you will go. You will represent the Parker family well. And he even suggested that I take the nice car. Now, I don't know if this is like your house, but in our house we had a nice car that we drove to church on Sundays, and my dad drove to work, and then we had this beat-up car that the kids would drive. He said, well, you should take my car to this. It's a big deal. I still was not convinced I should go, but she was very convincing. She knew how to convince me. She said, I live in Denver. If you come home with me to meet my parents, I live in Denver. Like, that was a big deal. I'm like, so? She goes, well, if you come home with me, I'll take you skiing. I said, well, I don't know how to ski. Well, I'll teach you how to ski. I've heard skiing is quite pricey. Okay, I'll pay for you to ski. Good, then I'm in. I'll go. So we go there, and I meet her family. It doesn't take very long to see why she's just a wonderful person, wonderful Christian family. We're having a great experience there. The day that we're supposed to go skiing, her mother asked me if I know where I'm going, and I do not. This is before cell phones and GPSs and even MapQuest. I mean, you actually had to read a map in order to know where you were going. I said, I don't know where I'm going. She said, oh, it's easy. I have to go across town. Why don't you just follow me in your father's car? You'll see the exit you need to take. You just follow the signs after that. So I need you to picture me here. Use your imagination. I've got one hand on the wheel, and I've got one hand on, Corrine was her name. And I'm laughing and joking because the trip has gone so well. It's gone a lot better than I thought it would. Her parents, I've completely fooled her parents. They think I'm a bright young man with a future. So I'm laughing and joking. I've got one hand on the wheel and one hand on, Corrine was her name. And she says to me, hey, I'd feel more comfortable if you put both hands on the wheel. You're not used to driving in Denver traffic. So I turn to her and I say, don't worry, I've got everything under control. Right as I said the word control, her mother, who was driving in front of us, stopped at a red light, but I did not. So I rear-ended her mom's car, probably going about 25, 30 miles an hour. Pretty big dent in both bumpers, pretty harsh jolt. I get out of the car and run up to see if she's okay, if her mom's okay, and she is, but she's quite angry, and she's yelling at me because the light is going to turn green. She's yelling at me to get back in my father's car. So as I run back to my father's car, I can see the dent in both bumpers. I get in my father's car, and I'm panicking at this point. I can't believe, why didn't you tell me to pay attention? This is horrible. My dad is going to kill me. He's going to make me drop out of college, get a real job to pay for all this damage. Your dad is going to think I'm an absolute idiot. Why didn't you tell me to pay attention? I'm going on and on and on. I look over at her, and she has got this exact smile on her face. And she's actually kind of laughing at me. And I said, this is not funny. I don't see anything funny about me rear-ending your mom. I don't think that's funny at all. She says, Micah, do you know the Bible verse, 1 Peter 5, verse 7? I'm like, no. It's like, oh, that's too bad, because that verse would be perfect for what you're feeling right now. Micah, getting to know you, you need to know this verse to get through life. 1 Peter 5, verse 7, will you promise me you'll look it up? I said, yeah, okay, I promise. So we get to the exit we're supposed to take. The car is still operational. It's pretty dented, but it's still operational. We're driving in the mountains now, and I've relaxed again. So picture me again. I got one hand on the wheel and one hand on Corrine again. I've relaxed because I've thought of the story I'm going to tell my dad about the gang of thugs that attacked both our cars simultaneously in the bumpers. So I've got one hand on the wheel, one hand on her again, and I'm laughing and joking. She says, hey, I'd wish you just put both hands. Just do the 10 and 2. You're not used to driving in the mountains. You've already been in an accident. Just put both hands on the wheel. This is a true story. I turn to her and I say the same thing I said before, which was, I have everything under control. The next corner we come to, I hit a patch of black ice, and our car spun 2 complete times around and then slammed into the side of an embankment. Poof. So now I've dented the front of my father's car, I've dented and scratched the side of my father's car, and I look over at her to see if she's okay, and she's laughing at me again, and we repeat that conversation. You know, 1 Peter 5, verse 7 was perfect for the first accident you got me in today, Mike, and it would have been really good for right now, too. The stress and the anxiety that you're feeling right now, you need to know that verse. Will you promise me you'll look that verse up? I said, yes. Well, we sat there for over an hour. Again, this is before cell phones and everything. I'm trying to wave down people to help me. No one's helping me. I'm bearing leg. I'm showing chest. Nobody's helping me to stop at all. I mean, it's really frustrating. Finally, a tow truck comes around the corner that I took so poorly, pulls us out, and we'll go to the resort. We get to the resort. She's going to have to teach me how to ski. I've never skied before. She's an expert skier, but nobody cares about that. She's an expert skier. They take us to the first hill, the beginner hill, and it's called the Bunny Hill. So I'm like, come on, can we go to a better animal? I mean, do I need to start at the bunny? I'm a pretty good athlete. I don't need to. No, we need to start there. So I'm skiing, and the first time you go skiing, how many of you have been skiing? Just raise your hand. Don't turn to your neighbor and tell them about it. But it's not like what you see on TV. And the first time you go skiing, it's not really all that fun. You don't just gently go down the hill like you see on TV. You plow back and forth, and you have to put your legs like this. This is not a position your body is meant to be in for long periods of time. And I tried, but you cannot look cool in this position. So I was getting kind of frustrating because instead of going down the mountain like I saw on TV, I was plowing. I was going back and forth. And I was getting frustrated because, little kids are flying by me. Hey! Handicapped people and their guides are flying by me. And I think, this can't be that hard. I'm just going to go. I'm just going to put my skis straight and go straight. So I do that, and I have a great time for a very short time. I have what older people would recognize as an agony of defeat type fall. The type of fall where other skiers just stop and go, oh. At the bottom of the hill, my face is deeply embedded in the snow. My skis are sticking up behind me. And Kareen comes skiing by me, and I think purposely, sprays me with snow, and then yells, 1 Peter 5, verse 7. Wish you knew it. So the next day, I'm loading up my father's car with the luggage. I get out there to the garage, and I notice I have a flat tire. So I'm changing the flat tire when she comes around the corner and says, wow, I cannot believe all the things that have happened to you in the last 24 hours. 1 Peter 5, and I'm like, I looked it up. 1 Peter 5, verse 7 says this. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. This is an important verse to know as Christians if you're going to understand adversity, trust at all. And notice it says cast all your anxiety, everything. When you get to be about your age, this is about the time where you stop praying at night. And that's unfortunate, but studies have shown that. But have you ever listened to a little kid pray? Little kids will go to bed at night and they tell God everything that's bothering them. They tell God about all their anxieties, all their issues. For some reason, we start to think that we're smarter and that we can handle everything. We get deceived to think that we only really need to go to God in the really big stuff. All this little stuff we can handle ourselves. That is a trap to fall into. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. I like the word cast in that verse too, because there's lots of fishing analogies in the Bible. To cast is to take something and throw it completely off of you. I really believe if you want to have true adversity trust, you need to be talking to God about the things that concern you, the things that cause you anxiety or cause you to lose sleep or have any type of worry. You need to constantly talk to God about those things. Cast all your anxiety on him because he loves you. Story number 2 involves me about 8 months later. Do we have any cross-country runners in here? Raise your hand. Awesome. I've seen a lot of pictures out there. You guys do pretty good. So I was in 8 months after that skiing incident, I was in the middle of a cross-country race. Now, I went to Concordia University in Seward, Nebraska, small Christian school, and I was an okay college athlete. In high school, I was a lot better. I was an okay college athlete. But for this one particular race, it was a 5-mile race, I found myself in unfamiliar territory. I was in the lead pack with about a mile to go. And it was a big race, about 150 college runners. All these Division I universities were there, and I was in the lead pack of about 10 guys with a mile to go. We come up on this big, long hill, about a quarter mile long. As we're going up the hill, I'm starting to hurt physically for what I had done to get to that point. And as I'm struggling up this hill, a runner comes up beside me and looks like he's going to pass me. Now, Kareen, who's an all-American runner, wins races all the time, but nobody cares about that. She's standing up ahead, and she's yelling at me to stay with this guy. So I have to tell you, there is no way I'm going to look weak in front of her. And so I stayed with that guy for probably 3-4 steps, and then I let him go. Because as I said before, I was in a lot of pain, and I made sure when I ran by her, she could see my facial expressions, how much pain I was in. Maybe she would have some empathy for me. At the very top of the hill, another runner comes up beside me and starts to pass me, and I'm thinking to myself, I hope she's gone, but no, I hear her yelling again, come on, Micah, stay with that guy. I let him go too, and in the very end of the race, I get out-kicked by a couple other guys. So even though I did not compete in the last half mile or so of that race, I just survived it. It was by far the best race I had ever run in my running career. I was so proud of how well I did. My teammates were telling me how great I was. My coach was convinced, maybe even asking me if I ran the correct route or not. Did you go over here and then over here? how did you end up over here? I was so proud of what I had done. I was sitting on the ground taking my shoes off, and I could not wait for the sure positive reinforcement my girlfriend was going to give me that day for just how awesome studly athletic I was in that race. Then I feel this harsh slap on the back of my head, and I turn around, and it was Corrine. And she looks angry. And she says, I can't believe you just did that. And I'm like, did what? What could I have possibly done? I just ran a race. What could I have possibly done that was bad? She said, I can't believe you would put yourself in a position like that and then just quit on yourself. Turned around and walked away. That was not the reaction I was expecting from her, but I don't understand women, so it didn't shock me all that much, I guess. I found her later, and I said, why are you upset with me for doing the best I've ever done? So she says, she gets all serious and says, well, I know you think you did well. So I was like, stop speaking in riddles. What does that mean? And what did I do that was so bad that you're upset with me? So she said this. She said, I've been thinking a lot about us, Micah, and we need to talk. Well, you know, you hear that we need to talk phrase. Nothing good comes after that phrase, right? I mean, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, your boyfriend, your teacher, your parents, the police. Anytime they say that, when you hear that we need to talk, there's a bad thing that's going to happen. So when she said that to me, I immediately thought, oh, she's going to dump me. Yeah, but I ran a really good race today, so it won't be that big a deal, right? She said, Micah, we need to talk. There's been something about you that's been bugging me, and I haven't been able to put my finger on it, but I've been praying about it. Then I watched you run today. I watched your race, and I realized what's really been bugging me about you. She said, Micah, what's bugging me about you is you're a person of convenience. Your race is exactly like your life. You do things pretty good up to a point, but then when it becomes challenging or a little bit uncomfortable, you kind of coast. You kind of quit. And then she started giving me examples. You're a BC student, mostly C at that time, but you know you're smart enough to be a straight A student. And you're a decent athlete. You do pretty well, but you know days like this should probably be the norm for you. I can live with those things. They annoy me, but I can live with those things. But what really hit me about you is I really believe your faith life is exactly like that race today, Micah. And she said, I believe you're a Christian of convenience. I've been called a slacker my whole life, so that first part didn't bother me. But to question my faith like that's kind of, come on. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I said, I got upset. And I said what anyone would say with my faith history when their faith was questioned. I mean, after all, I was a missionary's kid. I went to Lutheran grade school all the way up to 8th grade. I was currently at a Concordia University studying to be a church worker. I was working on an exegetical study. I carried a Bible every once in a while. I went to church. So I said what anybody with their faith history would say when their faith was questioned. I looked right at her and I said, huh? So then she gave me examples. And they were hard to hear. But she said, well, Micah, I've observed that you're a Christian when it's convenient for you. But I'm not sure you're doing what God has truly called you to do. And I'm like, what do you mean called me to do? I'm going to be a teacher and coach. I'm going to work at a Lutheran school probably. No, that's not what I'm talking about. What is God really calling you to do? And then she asked me a question that was really hard. She said, does your roommate know Christ? Does he have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? I don't know. I didn't know for sure. She goes, what about these guys that you run with? You run thousands of miles with them. You spend hundreds of hours with them, alone on gravel roads. You have all these conversations with them. You know some of them know the Lord, and you know some of them do not. And then she said something to me that was really harsh. I'll never forget this. She said, Micah, how much you must hate your teammates to not share Christ with them. Wow, that was hard to hear. Sometimes the truth is difficult to hear. She could tell that I was ashamed by hearing the truth, so she walked away, took about 10 steps, turned back at me, got a finger out, and started wagging it, and this is what she said. She said, I've been thinking about allowing you to spend the rest of my life with me, but that is not going to happen if you keep quitting on yourself and keep quitting on what God has called you to do. So I stayed away from her for a couple weeks. That's a lot to drop on a young guy. But I did pray about what she had said, and I knew it was the truth. I appreciated the fact that she was willing to risk and end our relationship because I was not an equal yoke to her spiritually. And she could tell that at that point, I was not going to be a spiritual leader in a house, or I was not going to be able to be a spiritual leader for her. So I appreciated her telling me the truth about that. Now, I'll show you a picture of us. This is a picture from when we were in college. I was what is commonly referred to as a what she doing guy. You see what she doing guys all the time. You see a couple walking in the mall or at school or at church. You look at the guy, you look at the girl, then you think, what's she doing with that guy? That was me. I was a what she doing guy. Now, I want to show you this. Guys, I need you to look specifically at what I'm wearing here and pay attention. Pay attention to what I'm wearing right there. And I want you to, if you take nothing from the 2 hours you're going to listen to me today, gentlemen, take this one nugget right here and understand this. This will help you in life. Look at what I'm wearing there and understand this. Are you ready? Fashion is cyclical. So if you want to stay on the cutting edge of fashion, get yourself one of those sweaters now because they're about ready to come back. They are cool. And I speak sometimes to larger groups, and every once in a while I'll see a guy wearing that same sweater, and then I can't say that joke. But you can see that God had blessed me. She was a wonderful, beautiful young lady. God did allow me to marry her too. Here's a picture of our wedding day. That's the best tuxedo $29.99 can rent. God blessed our relationship. God blessed our relationship tremendously. Story number 3 involves me 2 days short of our 5th-year anniversary. I found myself on my knees in the emergency room begging God not to take Corrine. That morning had started like every other morning. The alarm clock went off at 6 a.m. We were laying in bed talking about what I was required to purchase for her on a 5th-year anniversary when she said something very strange to me. She said, Mike, I feel my chest, my heart is beating strangely. So I'm still kind of out of it. I'm not really awake yet. I reach over to feel her chest, and she grabs my arm, yells out my name, and starts to shake violently. Started to have some type of convulsive seizure. Now, she was the epitome of health. She had run 7 miles a couple nights before. She was an all-American distance runner, ate well. I mean, just the epitome of health. She's the type of person that, like, when you're in the airport and you see all those fitness magazines, like, she would be on it. She would be that type of person. So this scared me, and she shook for what seemed like a really long time, but was probably a short time. I remember the fear, the look on her face of fear, because it looked like she was trying to gasp for air. And like I said, her body was really, really, really rigid. Her body goes completely limp. And then her head falls back against the pillow, and I see their eyes roll into the back of her head. So I shake her, and she's not moving. She's not responding to me at all. I put my face down by her face to see if she's breathing, and she is not. So I grabbed the phone, I called 911. I tell them what was happening. I was just laying in bed talking to my wife. Something terrible's happened. She's not breathing. She's not responding to me. Told them where we were. So we were both in graduate school at that time, and we were living in a dorm at Concordia. We were dorm parents. And so I told them what had happened, what dorm we were in, and I put the phone down, and I ran to the front door of the dorm because it was going to be locked. I propped open the door, and then I sprinted back into our apartment. And when I got into our bedroom, I put my hand on her throat to see if she had a pulse, but she did not. So I picked her up, I carried her off the bed and put her on the floor, and I started to do CPR on her. And as I'm doing that, I'm doing the compressions and the breaths, tipping her head back, pinching her nose. As I'm doing the 15 compressions and the 2 breaths, I'm going back and forth. I'm losing it emotionally because she's not responding to me. And I'm yelling at her to respond, and I'm yelling at the person on the phone. The phone is off the hook with the 911 operator, and I'm yelling at yelling at them, telling them what I'm doing, and I'm screaming at them to hurry up and get there because it just seems like forever. I do about 5 or 6 cycles of the compressions and breaths, and I'm losing it. I mean, I'm having a hard time because she's not responding. I tip her head back, pinch her nose, take a deep breath, and was going to give her the rescue breaths again, and she moves a little bit. And so I pull my hand off back from her body, and for a second, I have this instant, relief comes over my entire, and she moves a little bit, and then she turns her head and starts to vomit. I turn her head completely so she doesn't choke on that. After she gets done vomiting, her body goes limp again, and she's not responding. So when the EMTs come in our room, I'm over her face, trying to clear the airway of the vomit, trying to get the vomit out of her mouth so I can get air back in there. The EMTs rush in and they push me off of her. So I'm now leaning up against the clothes in our closet, and I'm watching them work on her. And it feels so strange. It feels like I'm in a movie, like I'm watching some strange thing that's occurring. They can't get her to respond either. They cut her pajamas away. They get out these electric pads, and they shock her body. They say clear, and they shock her body. I'm sure you've seen that on TV. Her body jolts and comes off the ground. Goes back down, no response. They do it again. They say clear. They shock her body. It jolts, no response. So they put her on a stretcher, and they start to wheel her out of our bedroom. I remember looking down at her as they push her by me. I remember looking down at her and not seeing Corrine. Now, you can sit there and be saying, gosh, why is he telling us this story? What an emotional bomb he just dropped on our room here. Why is he telling us this? This is not very motivational. This is not very encouraging. I'm telling you this story because I firmly believe what it says in Psalm 23. I shared with you before with Praise Trust, my cup overflows. It also says in that psalm, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Most of the time, people, when they read that line in that psalm, they think that's talking about the instant you die. I don't believe that. I believe that line there is talking about your life. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And the most important word in the entire Psalm 23, I know some of you have that memorized, the entire Psalm 23, the most important word, I think, is the word through. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I wish this wasn't true, but I can promise you that each and every one of you in your life, you may not go through that specific experience, but each and every one of you is going to have at least one great sorrow or difficulty in your life. Many of you are going to have more than that. It's so important that you understand as Christians, though, you are either going to walk through that valley or difficulty, or you're going to take up residency there. You're going to dig a ditch there. You become bitter and angry with what has happened to you in your life. Some of the valleys that you will have to go through will not be caused by you at all. You had nothing to do with it, but this thing happened, and you're going to have to deal with it. And then other valleys that you have to go through will be caused by you. It'll be your fault that you're in that valley. Either way, though, it's important to understand that. It's important to understand that psalm. So, having said that to you, I'm going to go and tell you the rest of the story now. So, police officer drives me to the hospital. In Seward, Nebraska, it was like 6 blocks away. By the time someone gets to the hospital in an ambulance, everybody knows what it is, what their diagnosis is, what their medication they'll be on. I mean, it's such a small town. By the time an ambulance gets to the hospital, everybody knows who's in the ambulance. So they put me in this small waiting room, and I told you the only thing, I was on my knees begging God not to take her. I couldn't think of I'd never felt so helpless and alone. So I got down on my knees and I was begging God not to take her at that time. The waiting room is starting to fill now with people from the college and the university. They called our parents to come quickly to the hospital. As I'm praying there on my knees praying, I'm thinking of all these words are jumbling around in my mind. I'm shaking and I'm crying until I think these words. I remember how clearly they came across in my mind. I said, Lord, I'm so sorry for not trusting you with this. I know that whatever you do with her this morning will be good because she knows Jesus. But please, Lord, give me the strength and the wisdom to handle whatever you decide. When I thought those words in my head and spoke them quietly as I was praying, something incredible happened to me. I was losing it emotionally. But when I thought those words, a sense of peace and calm just came over my entire body. I didn't know what was happening in the room next to us. I could hear the doctors and nurses running in and out. I didn't know what was happening over there, but I was given a sense of peace and calm. I knew that that she was in God's hands, and I knew that whatever was going to happen was going to be good for her. So I told you that the emergency room was filling up with people, and there was a lot of people in there. And a friend of mine came over and was hugging me and saying, everything is going to be okay, everything is going to be okay. And I said, I have no idea what's going on, but I don't feel like she's with us. I feel like Kareen is gone. We were there for what seemed like a long time until this old country doctor comes into the waiting room. He says, is the husband here? So I kind of raise my hand. He walks over slowly to me. He has big, weathered, old hands. I remember his knuckles were huge. He puts his hands on my shoulders, and he says, son, there is no easy way to say this, but your wife has passed away. And I said, from what? What happened? So we don't know. We don't know the cause of death right now. As a matter of fact, there is a helicopter coming from Omaha right now that they're going to take her soon to go do a quick autopsy to decide the cause of death. Do you want to come in and say goodbye to your wife before they get here? So going into the emergency room was hopefully the most difficult thing that I'll have to do in my life. I remember walking in there, and the nurses that were in there were weeping. I walked up to her body and felt her leg, and her body was still warm. I put my face down by her face, and I started telling her all these things I always had about how much I loved her and how much I didn't deserve her. But it was so strange because I was talking to her, but she wasn't there. I was talking to her body, but she wasn't there. I was talking to dust. I knew where she was. I absolutely knew where she was. But even though I knew that she was with our Savior, that day was awful. That week was brutal. That month was so difficult to go through. That first year was extremely painful. I had heard this before, but I didn't understand it until I had experienced how emotional pain can be physically painful. It was such a tough time, difficult time to go through. I learned a lot about what it means to trust God through a difficult time. I learned a lot about what it means to grieve. Now, most of the time, grieving is associated with a death. But actually, everything that is good in your life is going to end at some point. Everything in your life right now has a starting point and an ending point. The only thing eternal about you is your soul. So if you think of the three things that you really like about your life right now, that's going to end. Everything is going to end. And when those things end, we grieve to some extent. At some point in your life, you're going to grieve because you lost a job. At some point in your life, there's going to be people in here that are going to grieve because they've lost a child or a friendship. Or even when you finish a really good meal. Oh, man, that was good. We grieve every time something that is good ends in our life. When you leave here, when you graduate from here, it's going to be a very exciting time for you, but you will feel there'll be a certain part of you that grieves because a really good part of your life is ending, even though a fun and exciting part is about to start. We grieve when things end. So I learned a lot about what it means to grieve and what it means to go through that type of valley. I want to show you a picture of that's the funeral program. Now that had happened. That happened in 1995. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think about her. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not thankful for her. When you grieve or when something ends in your life that has been good, it takes great spiritual maturity and it takes a lot of time before you go from being upset at what has ended to joyful for what you've been given. I learned that instead of asking why things happen to us, we should ask a totally different question. Now, why questions happen all the time, and there's lots of dumb, silly why questions that happen in life. My favorite why question is, this happened to me when I was 8 years old. My favorite stupid why question is, why do they call where we sit in church a pew? I think that's a really weird name to be associated with church. I think when the founding fathers were sitting around and they're like, what should we call where we sit? I'm like, well, that's where, let's call that a pew. That sounds like a good idea. I think that's a terrible word to be in church. And the reason the reason it was stressful to me was when I was 8 years old, I called out to God in church, why, Lord? Why would you call that where we sit in church a pew? And the reason I called out to God in the middle of a church service was because I had just accidentally, and I say accidentally because I was raised in a very strict Christian family, I had accidentally just farted in church. And unfortunately, it was a perfect storm because it was a very small congregation, and the pastor had just paused in his sermon to make this great theological point, and it was a poor congregation, too. It wasn't one of those rich ones that had the cushion on the pew to observe the blow. So this sound came out of this young man that probably physically shouldn't have, but it did, and it just startled everybody. My mother looked at me, sitting next to me, looked at me with flames coming out of her eyes, grabbed my arm, and she said the following. She said this to me. She was so angry. This is why I called out to God. Why would you call where we sit in church a pew? Because this is what she said. This is really dumb and cheesy, but this is what she said. She's so angry. I had to have great composure for a small child to look at her and just say, yes, ma'am. She said, young man, if you do that again, you're going to sit in your own pew. Do you understand that? She had no idea what she had just said, but everybody else around her did and started laughing. It wasn't until about 2 verses into the next hymn that she realized what she had said, and then she laughed and gave permission for me to laugh too. But I called out to God, why? Why? People send me all these long lists of dumb why questions. My favorite one, and there's lots of language ones. There's lots of weird language ones in the English language. Why do we drive on parkways but park on driveways? Why do feet run but noses smell? Why do noses smell but feet run? Why does quicksand work so slowly? All those great theological questions we could ask ourselves. My favorite stupid one, though, and this makes me laugh at least once a month. You can tell I have a sophomoric type sense of humor, but why are there braille dots on the keypads of drive-up ATMs? I think that's just a weird place to have. I mean, do the blind really drive downtown to get cash? I have a visually impaired friend. It would be bothersome to me if he was driving the car in front of me. There's lots of weird, dumb why questions. The braille dots things, if you've ever looked at why some of the places they put those, I remember coaching once, and I was doing a poor job of coaching, and I was complaining to the refs the entire time, the entire first half. We go to our locker room. I'm standing in the hallway outside the locker room, and across the hallway is the referee changing room, and it has a placard right next to it. It says referee changing room, and below it there was braille dots. I became a better coach that day because, okay, I understood now. We have an understanding. You're blind. I get upset that you're blind. It's obvious you're blind. You had to use the braille dots in order to find the room that you were changing in. There's lots of silly places where those are. The dumbest place where those are, though, and I just saw this about a month ago, the most unused piece of equipment in our society and culture is the diaper changing tables in men's restrooms. And believe it or not, there's many diaper changing tables that have braille dots on them. I'm pretty sure we don't want guys changing diapers in the first place, but we really don't want blind guys changing diapers in the first place. Did they go and petition Congress for the right to have this? Why? I know there's serious questions that you ask too, like why does my friend have cancer? Or why did my parents get divorced? Or why do I look like this? Or why can't I have that? Instead of asking why, I believe God calls us to do something very spiritually mature. Instead of asking why, God wants you to ask him how. How, Lord, are you going to use this? And how, Lord, can you use me, even though I might be angry or disappointed at the situation my life is in right now? So there's two verses. There's a verse and 2 things I want to share with you that made me realize I need to ask how instead of why. This verse came from my confirmation, and I'm not great at memorizing Bible verses, but when I went through that experience, this verse kept on coming back to me. I want you to read that verse with me. In all things, God works for the good of those who love him. When I speak to an older crowd, people that have been through life and have had lots of life experiences, I say, think of the worst thing that's happened to you in life. What's the thing you've cried about the most or lost the most sleep about? This verse, if you're a Christian, you believe God's word is true, then that verse is saying that even the worst thing that happens to you in life, there's unspeakable things that happen to people in our lives. Even those things can work for the good of those who love God. It doesn't say you're not going to go through a valley or go through something difficult, but even the most difficult thing that you'll have to go through, God can and use that and will use you if you allow him to. The second thing that made me realize I need to ask how instead of why, and this still gives me goosebumps, was the last thing she wrote to me. Now I want to explain this to you. On a Monday afternoon, she burst into my office and started writing this up on the marker board in my office. She said, I was listening to this Christian radio station, and I heard this speaker, and he was really good, and I was repeating this quote all the way home so I wouldn't forget it. So she's writing down, it's really cool, Micah. You need to read this quote. You need to read this verse. So I turned to her, and I looked. I did what most males do in that situation. I grunted some type of acknowledgement, didn't read it, and went back to do what I was doing. That was on Monday afternoon. Wednesday morning, she died, went to be with our Savior. Late Wednesday night, I went into my office, I flipped on the light, and my eyes went to what she wrote. So I want you to read this with me too, and I want you to think how beautifully ironic it is that she would write this and say, I needed to know it, and then go to be with our Savior just a few days later. Read this with me. Whenever the Lord allows a wicked man to suffer, he allows a godly man to experience the same trial, so he can demonstrate how to overcome in God's power. People ask me all the time, where is that in the Bible? It's not in the Bible. It's something she heard on a Christian radio station. When I left that job, I took the marker board down, I went to the lumber yard, and they cut it out, and I put it in a glass frame, and it's in my office. So every day when I go to work, it's a reminder to me, Micah, today could be a praise trust day. You could be blessed with something that's unfairly cool and awesome. How are you going to witness Christ through that good thing? Or today could be an adversity trust day. You may be blessed with an adversity. If you claim to be a Christian, how are you going to use that, or how is God going to use that specific thing, even though it's difficult, for His kingdom? Whenever the Lord allows a wicked man to suffer, He allows a godly man or woman to experience that same trial so they can demonstrate how to overcome in God's power. Now, I told you that I was going to tell you a love story, and you probably thought, well, I've already done that. Well, it's not over yet. So a couple years after that had happened, I was in a large church after church in this narthex area, and I noticed this beautiful woman again on the other side of the room, a lot of people there, but I told you I have this innate gift. I noticed her. Not only did I notice her that she was beautiful, but I noticed her because she was walking directly towards me. It was almost like she didn't even see me, like she was going to run over me. So as she got close, I kind of backed out of the way. She gets closer to me, and she reaches out her hand and says, "Are you Micah Parker? I'm Amy." Now, I wish I could say that this happened a lot, that beautiful women would just walk up to me and introduce themselves. That's the first time it ever happened to me, so I panicked. I had about maybe 20 seconds of material, and then I said, "Hey, it was really good to meet you, and it's really nice to meet you. Maybe I can see you again sometime." I turned around and walked away and bumped right into a pole. Now, if that happens to you guys, don't turn around and look back. She saw it. Just keep walking. So that's exactly what I did. Just kept walking, hoping she didn't notice, but she probably did. About 6 months later, I had that 30-second interaction with her. About 6 months later, it was Christmas time. I was at some friend's house, and my friend comes and gives me a Christmas letter. She said, "You need to read this Christmas letter." I said, "Why would I read your Christmas letters? I don't even read my Christmas letters. I don't care about all this." "No, read this Christmas letter." So I read it. It was 3 paragraphs long, and it was from a person that had gone through something pretty difficult. It wasn't a typical Christmas letter where it just says, "Everything's great and my kid's great," and it was a brief letter about how she had went through something pretty difficult, but she could see how God was working through it. And I said, "Thank you. Thank you for making me read that. I needed to read that today." It was a really cool letter. And I said, "Who is that? Who wrote that?" She said, "Didn't you recognize the signature?" I said, "No, I don't know who that is." She said, "You remember the pole thing and the high and that's her." I said, "Wow, she has a great faith." So would you be able to maybe introduce me to her again? And my friend's like, no, that can't happen. I'm like, "Why not?" She said, "Well, shortly after you met her, Micah, she moved out to California. You have that effect on women. You can't meet her. But you could pray for what she wrote in that letter. You could pray about that." So I still run, and I pray a lot when I run, so I didn't know her besides that little 30-second thing, but I would just say, "Lord, bless Amy, and whatever is going through her, bless her." Short time after that, I started praying for her. I got an email from her. She said, "Would you be interested in doing devotions over the email?" So we started doing this. God blessed our relationship tremendously. It went from doing devotions over the email to phone calls to actually going out and visiting her. About 3 years after Amy walked up to me in church the first time, she walked up to me in church again, only this time she looked completely different. She was walking up to me down the middle aisle with her father. It's at this point where you're required to go, Aw, that's so nice. They must have got on a white horse and rode off into the sunset, and everything is just roses in their life, right? Amy and I are unfairly blessed in our lives. I'm unfairly blessed to have two beautiful Christian women in my life. I know when God made me, before they sent me down, they were like, hey, wait, that guy's going to need at least two Christian women in his life, and he's not Mormon, so we're going to have to go with that. I've been unfairly blessed in my life, but both my wife and I know, we've been married now for almost 20 years, both my wife and I know that when there's going to be difficult things that happen in our lives, we know how to get through that valley a little bit differently had we not had to go through those difficult times ourselves. Now, I told you I've been unfairly blessed. Unfairly blessed. Do you know what the most unfair word in the Bible is? It's the word grace. Grace is unfair. God's grace given to you is unfair. But if you are going to accept the good things that God gives you, sometimes we need to accept the difficult things that God gives us also, because we know He can and will work through that. So I want to challenge you. I got three quick things here to challenge you as I end here. And I want to also thank you because I appreciate the respect that you've given me. I've spoken for 2 hours. You've been wonderful to sit and listen. I appreciate the respect that you gave me to share that story. It's still tough to share that story. I told you how Mrs. Quant, remember my English teacher? And I told you how that I lost, and she said I had to be on the speech team, and I could see how God was preparing me to do something. I did not want to ever be a speaker. I had no desire to do that. No desire at all. And when I was asked after Karina died to do a chapel at Concordia about that experience, I said, absolutely not. There's no way I will do that. I did a 15-minute chapel. I had it tape recorded on a cassette tape. That's how long it was ago. I sent out 15 cassette tapes to my family and friends just so they could hear that chapel and know how I was doing, and they could see how God was working through that difficult time. People took that cassette tape, they brought it to their churches, they played it at their churches, and then people started asking me to come and share that story. About a year after she died, I was asked to go speak at the National Youth Gathering, and they asked me to share that story, and I said, no way. I don't think I can get through it emotionally to do that. My wife and I estimate that over 500,000 people have heard that story because Mrs. Quant tricked me into being on the speech team and in the play. I can look back and I can see how God was preparing me to do something because He knew what was going to happen in my life. So I have 3 quick challenges I want to give to you, and then I'm going to show you some fun pictures. I'm almost done. Thank you for the respect you've given me. Number 1 challenge, are you ready to die today? And more importantly, is the Holy Spirit working through you to get others ready? I am a little bit ashamed to say this, but it's the truth. When God looked down at that bed in 1995, and there was 2 people in that bed, there was one that was ready to go. I'm thankful, so thankful He took the one that was ready to go. I can tell you now with 100% confidence that I cannot wait to see my Lord and Savior. I cannot wait for that day to happen. Are you ready to die today? And are you getting other people ready also? Matthew 28:19 says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. That's not a suggestion, Christians. That's a direct command. Now, right away when I said that's not a suggestion, you thought something negative right off the bat in your mind. You thought, well, I can't do that. Well, I'm not going to be blessed. People aren't going to listen to me. I'm not going to be given a position of authority, or I'm not going to become a pastor. If you can be seen and heard, you should be evangelizing. If someone can see you or hear you, you're doing some type of evangelism. It's either good or bad, though. Make disciples of all nations. Second thing, life is full of peaks and valleys. God cares more about your character than He does your comfort. God sometimes loves you enough to allow challenges to happen in your life. In 1 Thessalonians 5:18, I used this verse before, the Apostle Paul got to the point where he could be thankful in all circumstances. The third challenge I have for you, I told you how oftentimes young kids will pray and they stop doing that as they get older. I want to challenge you to start every night before you go to bed. When you're laying there, turn your electronics off. Thank God daily for the blessings that he allowed to have happen in your life that day. And I said blessings, meaning thank God for the good things that happened that day, and also thank God for the difficult things that are happening that day. One of the best things I ever heard from a teacher about thanking God for difficult things or maybe even difficult people, and I've used this professionally for many, many years. You cannot hate somebody when you're praying for them. Someday, because I know about the talent and the smarts that are in this room, you guys are all there's going to be people in here that are going to be in charge of other people. And there's going to be people that are working for you that you cannot stand. That person is so annoying. I hate that person. It's hard to hate somebody if you're praying for them. Thank the Lord daily for your blessings. And I told you I've been unfairly blessed. I was unfairly blessed with another wife. We've been blessed with a family. I have EGP up there because I've been blessed with 3 children. I'm going to show you a picture. This is my favorite picture of my daughter, Emma. Emma is now a freshman in college at Concordia University, Irvine. This is my favorite picture of her, though. She's 10 years old. This is on our annual daddy-daughter date. Once a year, I get all dressed up. I take my daughters on a date. I buy them flowers. I take them to a nice place. I want them to get used to how they should be expected, how to be treated by a man. It's the best day of the year for me. I love it. This is my favorite picture of her because she looks happy there. I bless my kids at night. I would sneak into their room when they were small, and I would bless them. I would say a blessing over them that maybe you hear at your school or maybe you hear at church. At the end of the sermon or at the end of the service, the pastor will say, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you his peace." I don't have a problem admitting to you that there's been many nights where I had a hard time emotionally getting through that blessing when I was blessing my daughter because she's an unfair blessing in my life. A couple years later, we were blessed with a baby boy. His name is Jonah. Jonah is also a blessing. He's just an extreme blessing. When he was a small child, he had the energy of 10 men. He did not sleep for like the first 4 years of his life, never took a nap. We were convinced he never slept in his bed. This is my favorite picture of Jonah. Jonah is now 16, taller than me. This is my favorite picture of him because this is the day I taught him how to ride a bike. Now, my daughter Emma, when I taught her how to ride a bike, it took about 3 months, and I ran at least a marathon, bent over, holding her like this. Maybe your parents did that to you. Jonah, we went one time down the sidewalk, and this was the way back. That's him in his life. When I would sneak in to pray for him, too, I would say the exact same blessing, but with so much more intensity. And I remember one night I was in there blessing him, and he was about 3 years old. He had learned how to speak now. And at the end of that blessing, I was with Jonah. I'd say, "And give you," and then out of the side of my mouth, I'd say, "And everybody else around you, his peace." One night I was in there blessing him. I said the peace part. He opens one eye, and he says, "Piece of cake?" I'm like, "Oh, gosh. No, Jonah, just go to bed." He's also the reason we did not want to have a third child, but God has a sense of humor and blessed us with another baby girl. Her name is Gracie Joy. Gracie Joy Parker. So listen to the definition of her name. Gracie Joy. The definition of her name is undeserved happiness. Here's a picture of her. This is on her kindergarten day. So this is my favorite picture of my family. They're all different now. My daughter's as tall as I. Jonah's much taller than I am. Gracie leads the world in bling. She's a 5th grader, 10 years old. But that's my favorite picture. When I look at that picture, I'm reminded of just how unfairly blessed that I am. Now, I told you earlier, too, that I wanted you to look at this word a little bit differently. And I told you that, the jokes about what's in the middle of the word trust, you or us, or if your name is Russ, it works good, too. Told you how in the beginning Christ is there, and at the end Christ is there for us. I don't think it's a coincidence that right in the middle of the word trust is a valley. Right in the middle of the word trust is a valley. My prayer for you today is that you will look objectively at your life and ask yourself, do I trust God that much? When the difficult things in life happen to me, am I going to trust and have a peace and calm, even though whatever's going to happen is going to be very difficult? Or you could be angry and bitter with God. Will you have that type of trust? That's my prayer for you. So I want to pray for you as we end here. I want to pray for the rest of your Winterim little break here. But my prayer for you is that you completely understand what it means to give your entire heart over to Jesus Christ, to trust him with everything, to understand, but because of what he did for us, you will experience eternal life, happiness, and joy that we can't even fathom to understand because of what Christ did for us. Please bow your head and pray for me. Let me pray for you and then pray for me. Heavenly Father, thank and praise you for the people that are in this room. Lord, I ask that you bless them with the courage and wisdom to trust you in everything that happens in their lives. Lord, forgive them for the times when they put themselves in a valley for what they've done. Lord, forgive them for the times when they're going to be maybe bitter and angry or maybe even a little bit upset or not understanding why something difficult has happened in their lives. Pour out upon them your Holy Spirit so that they may trust you in everything that they do. Lord, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak at the school. I ask that you bless me with safe travel home. I ask that you bless each and every one of these students with the ability and the courage and the wisdom to evangelize through everything that happens in their lives. It's in Jesus' holy, precious name we pray this. Amen. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening to me today.